Thank you everyone for logging on to this webinar on sports psychology. I am joined by Dr. Emma Saunders, a lecturer at Southeast Technological University based in Waterford, but who also has a range of experiences working with athletes across a number of different sports, including Olympics, Paralympics, but also team-based. Everything we discuss today will be focused around practical strategies for you as teachers to go and use in your classrooms, and any resources we mentioned will be housed in the description box below or on a specific location on the PEAI website. This is a bit of a follow-on from Emma's in-person workshop at the 2024 conference based on feedback we got from people that they'd love a little bit more on this or a little bit more on that. So we're looking to put a really super practical application on all of the theoretical concepts we discussed with our students or that we see in the various books. And just small to PEAI, welcome you here, Emma. Thank you so much for giving your time to this, and I hope everyone gets something useful from it.
Thank you very much, John. Hello everyone, my name is Emma Saunders and I'm going to be discussing today about teaching sports psychology. So more specifically, how can we make our topics come alive or make them more relatable to the students that we teach. So just to give you a little bit of a background in terms of, I suppose, my relating it to this topic, both academic and applied work that I've done in this area. So in terms of my academic background, I would have a master's in sport and exercise psychology from SETU, and also did my PhD in sports psychology as well. And I've been lecturing in sports psychology related topics, both undergrad and postgrad, since 2008 in the Department of Sport and Exercise Science. So everything that we'll be talking about today, I'll either have done in the classroom or with athletes that I would work with. So in each section, what you're going to see is a statement or a definition, just to kind of start the topics off. I'll briefly link to the theory that you'll see in the PE books. And then I'm also going to hopefully give you a little bit of an analogy or sport example to try and relate to the topic, and hopefully the students will as well. Give some sample strategies that we can use to work on and build our psychological skills, either before, during and after. And really what I want to say is that this is more about sparking ideas for you to bring into the classroom. So whilst you mightn't need to bring in everything we talk about, hopefully it's going to spark some ideas for you to continue developing your own resources as well. And I will have on the last slide a couple of resources that I think would be worthwhile and helpful for you in terms of teaching in the classroom. Okay, just before we begin, for me, teaching sports psychology, whether it's in the classroom or it's with athletes, is all about understanding the connections between the topics, okay? And what I mean by that is there are pyramids of skills with our sports psychology. So at the bottom, it's what we call our basic skills, our general skills, or our foundation level skills. And at the top of the sports psychology pyramid is our performance skills. So this is the skills we need to perform under pressure. And for me, all of these relate. We build upon them to be able to work under pressure. But in the classroom, we're probably more curriculum driven, and we have to teach what's in front of us as well. So I think it's helpful in that case just to understand the connections. So for example, at the top of the pyramid, we have concentration, which is one of the topics on the PE curriculum. But really what influences our concentration is our motivation. It is our anxiety. It is our concentration, our confidence. So all of these things interrelate and overlap. And it's the same thing when it comes to the skills that we use, the strategies that we use to help build our psychological skills. So for example, goal setting can be used as a nice strategy and a tool to help build confidence, but it can also be used in a different way to build motivation. And it can also be used in another way to help with our concentration. So there is going to be an overlap. So it's just understanding those connections both between the topics and the strategies that we use. And again, before I suppose we get cracking into it, I'm aware that you have some example questionnaires, and I'm giving just a little bit of an overview of my thoughts on using the questionnaires. So you have questionnaires for pretty much everything in sport and exercise psychology. So here's just a sample from the 3 topics that we'll be talking about. So motivation, we've got ones for confidence, we've got questionnaires for anxiety, The bottom two are interesting. The bottom one, the second last one, the TOPS, the Test of Performance Strategies. This assesses our psychological strategies that we use both in competition and in training. And it looks at the difference between competition and training and the level of use of those strategies. So for example, goal setting, self-talk, imagery. So it looks at that. And the last one, the Athletic Coping Skills Inventory, that looks at our actual psychological skills. So our concentration, our ability to focus under pressure, our freedom from worry. Now, the pros of using all of these questionnaires, they are great tools to just have as tasks in the classroom. Okay, so that's number one. And people can relate to them and they get a score and it's really exciting. It also is brilliant in research and in applied work to look at, has an intervention worked? Has something that we have done and applied, has it worked? Okay, but what I will say on the opposite side is it just gives us a score. It tells us a score of something and it doesn't always tell us the why. It doesn't create an understanding. So again, what I'm going to, I suppose, leave you with and encourage is just about more so than just using questionnaires. It's about making the concepts relatable. So if we can use metaphors, analogies, examples, and I'm a big fan of reflection tasks, which is the sports psychologist in me. So I'm going to give you sample tasks as we go along of how we can make things more relatable and reflect a little bit more to create that understanding about what each of these concepts mean. So the next three tasks that I'm going to show you are, for me, I call them very kind of the foundation of building an understanding. So sometimes when I'm working with a team, or definitely when I'm working with first years in college, I like to start the semester with more so, without getting straight into topics, I like to start just with creating an understanding. Where does sports psychology fit into our performance? Why is it relevant? How does it impact our behaviours or our performance? And I believe if we can do that and create that hook and that understanding, it really just creates a bit more of a passion about the topic. So a nice task that you could do at the start is just either in groups, in pairs, whatever it is just looking at what makes a successful athlete. What do the students think makes a successful athlete? Or on the other side, what makes a successful team? And if you think about what we're doing here, number one, you will see fitness. You're going to see some S&C, you're going to see nutrition, you're going to see all of those answers. But more often than not, most of the things that are written on the page are psychologically related. Confident athlete, motivated athlete, someone who can perform under pressure, and someone who can work with their teammates, a good leader. They're all related to more the psychology related aspects. And what I like to do then is talk to them about, well, if they're very valuable and important and make a successful athlete or a team, how often do you practice them? How often do you train on those skills? And it just creates that discussion at the start about the importance or the value and the relatedness about that. So it's a nice little opener at the start as well. It can also work really well with teams that haven't had much psychological input as of yet to create that kind of awareness and understanding. You can also then try and create an understanding of the psychological demands of the sport. And I find this one very interesting because when we ask people about the psychological demands, a lot of the time we think it's just on the inside, what's happening in our mind. But we have three different related categories. So the first one is when we think of psychological demands, it's dependent on the person. It depends on their normal disposition. Are they a confident person? Do they suffer with a little bit of anxiety? How motivated they are? How much psychological skills that they have themselves? So that's the first element that influences the psychological demand of the sport from us inside. The second thing is the context that they're involved in. When I say context, I mean, what is the sport? So we have golf, which you have a lot more time to think as you go around. We have open play sports, open sports where we're just working off what's coming at us all the time and there's not much time to think. Okay, so we have a lot of different types of sport. What is the context of the sport? We've also got the context of the actual game. Think of the All-Ireland finals. Okay, that's knockout, it's championship. versus the start of a league. Okay, it's also, are you the underdog or are you the person who's going for 5 in a row? And that creates a different dynamic and a different atmosphere as well. We've also then got the environment. That also influences psychological demands in sport as well. So when I say environment, that could mean 2 things. One, something like the weather. So if we think of the second last Olympic and Paralympic Games in Tokyo, the environmental challenges that influence our psychological demands would have been, it was during COVID. So they had that to contend with, and that influences how we think and feel around that. It heightens our anxiety. It was a closed games, which means family isn't around as well. That environment is very different to what we're used to. But the environment can also mean the coach-athlete relationship, whether we're on a team that's supportive versus a team that's not. So when we think of our psychological demands, a nice task you can do in class is maybe give them those 3 categories and ask them to think of a scenario or a game. So you can give them the All-Ireland finals, or you can give them the Olympics, or you can give them a different type of a situation and get them to break it down and say, what do they feel are the psychological demands of that? What influences us in those contexts? And again, what we're doing there is just creating another understanding that it's not just what's happening in the mind, it's our perception about all of it that's happening there. And the last kind of intro task that could work as well is just understanding the influence of all of this on our performance. How does it change? How does it impact? What is the impact? And we know from sports psychology that a lot of the time it's broken into that CBT, that our thoughts can influence our emotions and our feelings, which then can influence our behaviours. So sometimes a nice task could be asking them to think of 2 contrasting situations that they've been involved in sport or even in school. If they're not linked to sport, maybe it's school. So maybe it's a subject they've done really well on or an exam that they're nervous about. And again, get them to write really briefly in those 3 different sections. What was their thoughts? What was the difference in their thoughts around those 2 different situations? Was there any difference in how that made them feel? Whether it's physiologically or just what they were thinking and their emotions. And also then in their behaviours, did anything change? And when I say behaviours, it could be they procrastinated. They didn't want to do it. Or they approached it with excitement. So we can see that there's a difference between different situations and how we think, feel and then behave. And again, that's creating an understanding with our students about how we think and feel can influence our performance on the pitch. Okay? So what I'm going to ask you to do now is just pause and reflect. They're just some intro tasks. I just encourage you to pause and reflect. Has any of this sparked any new ideas for you? Or maybe perhaps you're doing that in the classroom already. Do you have any metaphors, analogies or exercises that you could bring in that links to a relatable discussion? And also sport examples. Think of things that have happened over the summer. Obviously the All-Ireland finals are things that are there, whether it was camogie, football, hurling. There's plenty of examples. There was athletics, rugby. So can you think of any examples that might be useful for you to bring into the classroom? Okay, the first topic that we're going to look at is motivation. And again, we know that motivation is described as the direction or the intensity or the effort that we give to an activity. So really how I like to describe this is motivation is the energy. It is the energy towards the action that then determines our behaviour. So it's how much energy we give to something. But when we look at the books and the sports psychology books, there's a variety of slants that you can take with motivation. And the most common one is the different types of motivation. So we'll have known the terms intrinsic motivation, which is within, and extrinsic motivation, which is something that's outside of us, from somebody else, okay? So in general, the research will tell us that intrinsic motivation is better it's more powerful and it helps sustain motivation longer term, okay? That is not to say that extrinsic motivation doesn't do anything for us. If I do this exercise now and have a bar of chocolate, that's extrinsic motivation. So we know it works, But for more sustainable and powerful motivation, intrinsic is better. But more of a more relatable slant of motivation is, how do these things actually sustain our motivation? What can we do to help and enhance that, okay? So how I like to, I suppose, describe this is just creating more of an understanding that motivation is not a straight line, okay? It is not a straight line. No elite athlete wakes up every single day and says they are extremely motivated to do all of the activity they had to do that day, okay? The hard work in the gym, the eating really healthy, the pre-season training, the repetitive drills, okay? That takes a lot of something else rather than just motivation. It's discipline, it's consistency. And there's even new research to suggest that obviously our motivation obviously does fluctuate throughout the day and throughout the week, and it's very dependent on sleep quality, our happiness, our mood, our emotions, fatigue, and even days of the week. So the better we are towards the end of the week, because we know it's coming to the weekend. So motivation, we have to kind of break down that barrier that you either have it or you don't. We can help create and sustain motivation, okay? And here is even a quote from our Rory McIlroy after the 2025 Masters, and this after winning the Masters. I always struggle to show up with motivation the next week because you've just accomplished something that you want to enjoy and you want to sort of relish the fact that you've achieved a goal. So then he went on to say, I sort of need to get my stuff together here. And this was after the Masters when he wasn't doing well for the next few tournaments. But he needed to get back to the process of what he'd been doing for 7 months prior to that. So that even shows that even the most elite are not always motivated 100% of the time. And even an example from the All-Ireland final, and the headline being that David was linked to being Lionel Messi of Gaelic football. And I put this up because I thought it was really interesting. And he said that I think that people that say that are actually trying to build you up in the hope that you fail. And that's a very interesting fact, or not a fact, it's a very interesting perspective on someone's comment. So for me, this was actually, whilst I know Dave Clifford is extremely intrinsically motivated, this to me seemed like these comments were driving him from an external perspective as well, trying to prove people wrong and make sure that they are, that they know that he's going to succeed as well. So it's just another example of we're all motivated by different things. So one of the other things is to understand how do things influence our behaviours? How does motivation actually influence our behaviour? Well, it influences the choices we make. So when we're motivated towards something, we do the good choices. When we're not motivated, we might take the easy way out. Our effort, energy, intensity that we give to things, how persistent we are. Do we give up or keep going? Our focus, what we're doing, and how proactive we are in approaching these things. So motivation does play a role in our behaviours and our performance behaviours towards things. And I know you'll have seen the theory, the self-determination theory of motivation, and this is in the books as well by Decky and Ryan. Now, in this theory, I'm going to use this to how can we now build and sustain motivation, okay? So the theory tells us that autonomy, competence and relatedness are key drivers in helping and sustaining motivation long term, okay? So whilst these three can change in strength from person to person, for example, John here might be more driven and motivated by the autonomy he gets by, setting goals and achieving that. I could be more driven by the relatedness I get by being on a team or the connection I get from others around me. So we're all driven by a different strength, but theoretically from this, it says that it's universal. We're all driven by these things. So how does this theory help us influence our behaviour? It shows that if I have a bit more freedom, if I feel that I have control, autonomy over something, if I feel that my competence, I can achieve something, if I try, I can get better and better and achieve and work towards my goals. And if I feel connected and related towards that task, that helps to sustain my motivation. On the flip side, If I don't feel connected to either the group or the sport, if I don't feel I have enough control to actually get better, if I feel it's outside of my control, and if I don't feel that it's my choice, that can then hinder our motivation. Okay, so it makes sense when we connect it like that. So how can this theory then help to influence our motivation? So here's some task ideas that we can do to use that theory to connect the dots for the students, okay? So the first one is simply a reflection task, okay? And as I keep saying, big fan of reflection. So you might be sick of my reflection tasks by the end of this. But to open up and create an understanding of what motivates them, creating that discussion that we're all driven by different factors, you can do a reflection task. Ask them to think of 2 contrasting activities and situations, okay, high versus low motivation. Ask them to think of what were the triggers or the factors or the differences that they can think of that changed their motivation. Perhaps it was sleep, food, it was that they liked or disliked the activity, they were confident in the activity, not confident in the activity. And then get them to think about, well, what was the internal influence on that? In other words, did it change the way you thought about the activity? So you might have been, oh, well, sure, if I do this, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't, I don't like it anyway. Versus, I love this. I think I'm getting better. I can do this. And then also getting them to think about the external influence. Did it change their behaviour towards something? So going back a couple of slides, did it change their choice? Did it change were they procrastinating versus being very proactive at something? Did they, shy away from it versus approach? So we can link that simple reflection activity here back to the self-determination theory as well. So did they note that their triggers or factors that changed their motivation was linked to anything related to autonomy, relatedness, or competence? And what we're doing in that task, whilst it seems very simple, is again creating that grounding and that understanding of where it fits in, okay, for them. And once we can connect to a theory, I think it just becomes a little bit more relatable. So that's the first task of creating an understanding. The next one is quite broad, okay? So I call this creating our why or understanding our why. We're all driven for a different reason. So when we understand our why, it can help us go, okay, well, that drives me a little bit more, so I can influence these things and put them in place a lot more. So you can ask the students to think of why they first got involved in sport or in their primary sport. Do they still compete now, and do they recognise any changes? Why do they compete now? Has it changed? So let me tell you, I suppose, the why of that. A lot of the time when we get involved in sport, it is to do with more relatedness. My friends play. We're socialised into it. But then as we go on, it is due to potentially competence. I'm good at it. I actually really like this. So our motivation changes over the years. So we can also ask them to really think of those, not just I enjoy it, but what is it that you really enjoy? So get them to give you full answers. And then again, same thing. Relate it back to the self-determination theory. Did anything connect the dots there? Was it intrinsic? Was it extrinsic? Was it competence, relatedness, autonomy? You can also frame the questions a different way and get a little bit more specific and ask them about their season. So if they play sport, or even about their Leaving Cert year or their 5th year. What do they want by the end of the academic year? What do they want by the end of their sporting season? How do they want to feel? What outcome would they be happy with? If it's sport, what gives them a buzz in sport? And all we're doing here is connecting again to that why, making things a little bit more relatable. And once we create that, we are creating connection, relatedness, autonomy. And that can all help sustain our motivation and our actions and our behaviours. So those first 2 tasks are broad, they're different, and they're reflection tasks, but they're designed to just create an understanding of motivation, okay? The next one is goal setting, which is probably the most common strategy that you will see in sports psychology. Okay, it is overused, but I feel sometimes underutilized correctly. Okay, so we do it, but are we doing it specifically? Are we doing it as a strategy? Goal setting can be fantastic to sustain motivation, but we need to ensure that our actions meet our expectations. Okay, so for me, it's more about creating the understanding of why goal setting works. So I want the students to understand why goal setting works. Firstly, it sustains our motivation because it's something we should be passionate about, and it's creating that competence and relatedness and autonomy. It also is securing commitment because you are committing to a goal and a process. It also helps us narrow our focus because we're focusing on something specific and controllable and actionable. And then the little stepping stairs there, it shows us that we can break a large task down into something nice and small and bite-sized, and we can see our progress as it goes. Okay, so goal setting works for a multitude of reasons. But there are common problems with goal setting. Okay, we can sometimes have too much of a narrow focus. So we're focused so much on something that we won't budge left or right to adjust our goals when it's needed. Okay, so we have to help the students understand that goal setting is a process and it's dynamic based on how things are going. Okay, so we need to be able to adjust it. Okay, sometimes we set something that is too high or too low. And sometimes we fail to evaluate as we go along. So those lovely little stepping stones, the little stairs that we had in the last slide, they're bite-sized chunks. Are we evaluating every time we meet those and get those so we can adjust our goals as well? Okay. So what this is telling us is that goal setting is more of a process and a strategy. Okay. It should be strategic. And again, going back to Rory McIlroy, when he talked about the motivation and being a process, there's a really good interview with him. I have the link here for you. And specifically between 18.5 minutes and 20 minutes, he discusses all about his goal setting process. Okay, and he describes it as you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And I found that really good, really fascinating. It's a perfect clip for class because it talks about goal setting isn't just about setting a goal. It's about the process we set around it. So it's a really good clip. And linking into that, I absolutely love this. I got it from online from 2024. Adam Peaty, GB swimmer. He talked about his roadmap that he created in the year out, the 12 months out from Paris. He talked about the need to be able to visualise where he was going. But really why I like this is because he's talking about that goals, some people set goals but having zero idea about what it takes to get there. So by having a roadmap, it keeps him accountable. But why I love this example is because he talks about a behaviour awareness box. He talks about what it takes to get there. So on this next slide, I'm going to show you his roadmap. It's a really lovely visual. Now bear with me because it looks a bit hectic in there, right? And obviously someone created this for him. But the roadmap is his 12 months out from Paris, okay? You'll see that he is broken down into per month, but also in different weeks. He's aware of where he needs to be and what different activities have to happen to progress as he goes, okay? So that's his process there. However, what he's also done is, as you can see down at the bottom left here, a monthly check-in with his why. So let's go back to a couple of slides back when we talked about understanding our why and what's driving us. Sometimes when things are getting really hectic, when things aren't going according to plan, we might lose sight of our goals and feel it's a bit worthless. But checking in with our why creates that connection back into things. So goal setting and that why is huge. The top right there, the behaviour awareness box, he's starting to understand, well, coming around to here, when I'm in Thailand, my diet might be off, my risk of burnout is large. So I know that's a trigger for me. So he puts plans in place to manage that. Okay, so this whole, I suppose, lovely visual map, whilst it looks confusing, is broken into pieces. It's a roadmap, but it also has a strategy. It has behaviour awareness. It has check-ins, evaluation. And that's exactly, I suppose, what goal setting is. So this visual can help bring it alive to show what it actually takes. So what you can do in the classroom then is get students to maybe do a task on goal setting. Get them to look at what would you like to achieve? What is your vision? Is it realistic? Is it exciting? Is it controllable? Are there any barriers? So even if we're thinking of sport example or their Leavenscert year, maybe there's barriers that impact their motivation, their consistency, their effort, their competence over that amount of time. What can we do to manage around that time? Once they've figured out that, then you get them to start goal setting and putting the SMARTER principle in place. And we have to make sure we build in check-ins, whether it's weekly or monthly. What's going well, what needs to change, and why. Okay? So a nice activity you could do in the class is looking at pair and share. So get them to set a goal. If they don't want to share an academic goal, maybe they'll share a sporting goal, or maybe they'll just make up a hypothetical goal for you, okay? And they can go, you can get them to checklist, is it a SMART goal? Is it specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely, etc.? And that again just helps them not just write it, but check in with somebody else as well and see and check that list. And I've put down here a link to Athletics Ireland. Another sports psychologist, Jessie Barr, had created a nice PDF form for Runuary in Athletics Ireland. And it's a nice example of being very strategic with our goal setting, and it has action boxes that you can type in as well. So maybe that's something that you can give to the students as an example. So goal setting is something that obviously can help and sustain our motivation through a variety of ways. Pre, during, and also after. So when it comes to motivation, I'm going to ask you again just to pause and just have a think. So is there anything new that you've learned or sparked an idea? I've created the analogy or the metaphor that motivation is the energy. It's the energy to something. Is there another way that you think would make that more relatable for you? I've given a couple of examples there from Adam Peaty, Roy McIlroy, David Clifford. Is there any examples that you can think that might make it easy for you in your class to bring? What other examples have you seen? The exercises I have given you, some are broad and some are very specific. Maybe there's other ideas that it sparked for you as well. And when it comes to motivation before, during and after, goal setting obviously works for all, before, during and after. Before, it's setting us up. During, it's sustaining us. The after is the reflection part. Is it working? And seeing you achieve your goal then doubles down, motivates you for afterwards, but also enhances your confidence, which we're going to see in the next slide or the next section.
That's really good, Emma. I just want to jump in with one question there. So when it comes to the physical activity project, the first project that's submitted for Leavenscert PE, the students have to set 3 performance improvement goals, which are generally SMART goals. We've spoken a lot there around like putting more time and effort into like the shaping out of that. But I think even what's important there is the process, or adding in some element of process to the goal. So while the students may have written on their sheet of paper, my goal is to, a hypothetical example, I want to increase my level of confidence in some form of scale from a 15 to 22 when I'm about to take free by the 8th of December. While we may not write it down, it's worth having a few process goals in place around. So for my practice, I need to set an alarm on my phone to pack a bag every Monday evening at 8:30, so it's ready to go, take more frees the next day, and set up maybe a little practice buddy that I meet up with after school every Tuesday afternoon, or other little processes like that to keep you on track, even though I might not feel motivated today. It's a bit dark, it's a bit wet, not really feeling it, but having all those in place just leave me way more chance to do what I want to do despite not feeling, we'll say, motivated.
Yes, so that's exactly it. We can set our vision of what we want to do, okay? But having a look at, nothing will go perfectly. Like, things don't go always according to plan. I could wake up, I'm running late, so I won't, pack my bag. I don't have my lunch ready, so that's going to set me back for the day. So what we're trying to do is ring fence that and plan more proactively around it. So that's one thing, the barriers element, okay? So being more proactive. But the other element is, if I want to build my confidence, like, where are the gaps? So what am I trying to build in the first place? So if it requires me to take more frees, have to buddy up, so I'm getting feedback, and all of those things, then I have to set those things up. So goal setting really is bridging the gap from where I am to where I want to be, but there has to be actions. Like, what's going to build that gap? What's going to bridge that? So I think it's getting the students to just think about each of those process steps. And the examples are in the PDF that I've shared there as well. It can be really helpful. And in the next section in confidence, I'm going to share a resource book that can also help you kind of have a goal setting template. But for me, that strategic process is really important. What are your clear actions daily and weekly that are going to help bridge that gap of confidence?
Good, and that can feed into your reflection piece at the end. Did I meet my performance goal, my outcome goal at the end? And then was I meeting all those small little process steps along the way? And could maybe not have meeting those have been what led to not meeting the outcome at the end?
Yeah, and just getting them, maybe even, I don't know how realistic it is, but getting them to add in maybe a weekly. So what I do with my first years is, it's actually in a different module, it's in lifestyle management. I get them to set out 3 goals for the academic semester. And they also have a weekly, I suppose, check-in point with themselves. So they set themselves a weekly goal. You know what I mean? So they have a long-term semester goal. Then they have their actions that they're going to do and why they need to do it. And then weekly, what are they doing to build on that each week? And then they have an end-of-week reflection as to how it's going. And that reflection could be literally just a couple of lines. It's a check-in. So again, you're then setting yourself up the following week. What do I need to adjust? How is it going? Is this achieving what I need to do? And you're moving on again.
That's excellent. And all those resources we've mentioned, they'll be in the description box below and on the PEAI website.
Yes. Okay, we're getting on to one of my favourite topics, which is confidence. And I think this topic in particular can be the most relatable for everybody, because we all, I think, can relate to this, okay? So, defining self-confidence, we know it is defined as the belief in our ability to be successful, okay? Now, those 2 words I've underlined are probably key for me to understand with athletes and with students. Confidence is not always fact, because it's the belief in our ability for something. So it's not always entirely based on fact. So that term, when we always hear it, I don't feel confident. So confidence can sometimes be a feeling. So the most elite athletes in the world don't always feel confident. So I have here that this might be an interesting podcast for you to listen to. It's the Sports Psych Show. It's number 250 of it, and it's with Dr. Mitch Green, and he talks about managing chatter. Okay, so when we talk about chatter, it's our mind chatter, our self-talk. But he has written a book called Courage Over Confidence, and just talks about confidence being a great term, but because we don't always feel confident, it's more about our courage, our actions. So I just think it's a really good listen to understand and get some ideas. So I'd encourage you all to listen to that as well. So given that confidence is not always, something that we have, okay, it can fluctuate between the start of the match, the middle of the match, the end of the match, okay, or the start of a race and the end of a race. So we want to make confidence relatable, and how I make it relatable is by looking at it being like a battery, okay? Some things charge our battery and some things drain our battery, okay? And that's the same with confidence. Some things fill it up and some things drain our confidence. So we want to know what are those things so that we understand what it is. So a nice little task, I do this with first years, but I also do it with athletes sometimes, is just identifying the sources of our confidence. So I get them just to think, what boosts our confidence? What is something that really enhances my confidence? And on the flip side, I get them to write down, what is something that drains my confidence? Now I get them to think of a certain activity or situation. So it's one sport, or it's something from college or school. And get them to think what boosts it and what drains it. And what I do with athletes is I also then get them to identify, out of everything you've written down, what is the most controllable? What is the least controllable? And a lot of the time you will see that people gain confidence from a coach telling them that they did really well. But that's not a controllable source of confidence, because it's not always readily available. So we want them to relate to what's more, what can we do, okay? But what I do in class is I get them to relate back to the theory of Bandura's self-efficacy theory that's in your books, okay? So that theory just suggests that there's sources of efficacy, things that build us up. And they come under performance accomplishments, vicarious experiences, which is learning through others, learning through our peers, social or verbal persuasion, which is what others say to us or what we say to ourselves. And then we've got emotional or physiological arousal, how our body feels at a certain time, okay? So that's just one theory of things that boost us. So when they map out what drains their confidence or what enhances their confidence, I get them to link back to that theory and say, are any of those about your performance accomplishments? Are any of those about what you see others doing? Are any of those about what others tell you? And again, it's just a nice task to get them thinking about the theory and the connection between the theory and the application. Another thing that I do is I sometimes show post-race interviews, post-match interviews, or just interviews in general, and I get them to relate back to theory. So sometimes you might see a really good clip in the media, and it's an athlete will be talking about, oh well, I came into this race feeling really confident because of the last race I had, or training was going really well. That's performance accomplishment. You might also have, my coach told me this and that. That's social persuasion. You might also have, in this clip in Sarah Healy, you have her talking about how in the first couple of laps, actually, she was feeling really good and she knew she had energy to kick to the end. That's our emotional and our physiological arousal. So within one clip, you get them to relate back to the theory. So that's one of the most recent ones I have. I did have a really good one as well from Brendan Boyce, but it was back in 2019 from the World Championships in Doha, after he came sixth in the world. But I just thought that was a little bit older in context, so this one was this year. So that's just a nice little hook that you can do in class to relate to the theory. So if we know the theory, Bandura's theory, we also know what strategies can help enhance. So I'm going to talk about two in particular. I'm going to talk about performance accomplishments and verbal persuasion. So how can we enhance our confidence before and during? Okay. Obviously, goal setting can also translate into confidence. So by setting our goals, we're seeing ourselves achieving our accomplishments in small little steps as we go. Okay, so that's obviously goes without saying. But we can also do things before to boost our confidence before a match, before a race, whatever it might be. And you can do something like a strengths audit, or what I would call sometimes our superpowers. And this is where we get someone to have a positive psychology approach and look at our strengths going into something. Okay, so you could get them to map out, well, what are my strengths for this in my fitness? What is my strengths in my strategy? What is my strengths in my skills, my tactics? What are my strengths in my mindset? And also, what if you're in a team sport, or even if in an individual sport, what is my strengths in the support around me that I can use maybe during or whatever it might be? So I can maybe call on my teammates. Maybe at half time we could chat about something. So you can also add in things like, how have I challenged or handled challenges well over the last couple of weeks? And what we're doing here is we're simply providing us with evidence. It's evidence-based, and we're bringing up our confidence because we're now not worried about the what ifs. We're focused on, here are my strengths to manage this situation. Here are my strengths to contribute to this. So just that's a lovely confidence booster that you can do. So we can map out our strengths. If we're thinking about post, so the after, okay, before, during and after, and confidence, you always want to do the reflections, okay? So whether we achieve our goal or whether we don't, a post-race, post-match reflection can be really powerful. And we simply follow the what went well, what didn't, what would I do better next time, and that gives us an action for the next training session. Okay, and we're taking the emotion out of it. It's not emotion driven, it's fact and evidence driven. So you always want to start with what I did well. no matter what. So what are the at least 3 things that I did well in this race or match or competition, whatever it might be? What are the things that may not have gone as well as I wanted to? What will I do next time if I was in that situation, or what will I do next time to change that? And what am I going to work on next week to do that? How does that boost for after? It just keeps us grounded and moving forward, okay, with the controllable actions that we can. So that's a nice little reflection. You could also bring that into the motivation goal setting as well. The other area, bit going back to Bandura's theory of building self-efficacy, is verbal persuasion. So I'm talking about what we say to our own. This links to self-talk, okay? And we know with self-talk that perception and awareness of a situation is key. It's not always what's exactly happening around us. So going back to that whole circle of thoughts, feelings and behaviours, okay? When we talk about self-talk, we have to break it down that we have spontaneous thoughts and we have strategic thoughts. Spontaneous thoughts happen to all of us, all of the time, okay? So they're not controllable, they just pop into our head. But we have to remember that thoughts are not fact. So if I was working with an athlete or looking at self-talk, we would be just looking at thoughts are not facts, but actually the weight, what's important is the weight we give to that thought, okay? That's what's important. So if I ever work with an athlete, it's more about helping them outside of the pitch, outside of the track, to first look and challenge their self-talk. So we learn to do that first, okay? We learn to put it in context. But for you going into the classroom, okay, it's probably helpful just to look at exercises we can do to help build what we call strategic self-talk. So when I say strategic self-talk, I mean self-talk as a tool, as a strategy to help confidence, okay? So I just wanted to paint that difference. You can see the link up here, you can click on that, and it's just a simple video that goes through different strategic self-talk exercises that can help, okay? But I've also put up here this book. It's a workbook, and it gives loads of different exercises that you can use, particularly with self-talk, okay? Now, I'm focusing on the few that can help with confidence more specifically, okay? So the first one I put down is technical or instructional self-talk. Now, this one, not necessarily just confidence, okay? It can help with concentration, but that's really our key words. It can help us if our thoughts are spiraling a little bit. It can help us come back on track during or before an activity. And the exercises are in that book to help do that. So instructional self-talk is really more about a cue about, if it's basketball, it could be about bending the elbow. It could be about following through. If you're taking a penalty, it could be reminding yourself, take that deep breath, slow, controlled. But you can also have motivational mantras or affirmations, which are very helpful so before, and that can help inspire. It can help just keep you on track and set up some motivational mantras. Again, some of the exercise examples are in this book. If we're talking about during a race, during something, we don't have a lot of time, do we, during an activity to kind of bolster our confidence. So really it's about redirecting our attention to something, to the present. But thought stopping can be a nice little activity as well. So stopping the thoughts, stopping the self-talk if it's spiraling into the negative. Okay, and that exercise again is in that book that you can look at how to do it step by step. And if we're talking about after in confidence, again, it's just that reflection. Can they realise and recognise the self-talk or the mind chatter that was happening there? Why was it happening? Could they switch that up and have more of a thought-stopping practice as they go forward? Okay. So the verbal persuasion, when we're talking about that in terms of confidence, is more about implementing strategic self-talk if and when needed, okay, to help us focus on the present. Okay, when it comes to confidence, I'm going to pause or ask you again to pause and reflect about what we've just discussed. Again, is there something that new that you've learned, or has it just reminded you of something? I've used the metaphor, the analogy of confidence being like a battery things drain it, and I think that's a nice one. I really like it, but maybe you have different analogies. I've given you a few examples of Sarah Healy. Maybe there's other interviews that you can spot that link really well as you go along. And again, just the exercises that we do, that Bandura's theory is really helpful in terms of enhancing and building our confidence. It tells us all we need to know in terms of the types of exercises, something about our accomplishments, something about our self-talk, something about learning through others. So peers are our vicarious experience. So can they learn through a teammate, seeing them do it, showing them evidence of that? And then also just understanding that when we feel physically and mentally, I suppose, able to cope, that belief is key as well.
Really good, Emma. Again, some nice practical strategies there. I just want to come in with one question around confidence, or maybe the opposite of confidence. No, not the opposite of, too much confidence. Are there situations where a student in front of us might be overconfident? And what are the potential implications of that around setting goals that are not within their capabilities, maybe setting out processes to achieve a goal that are unsustainable, or just general under preparation for not training enough for an upcoming sporting event, or just not studying enough for their mocks? How can we use that as maybe a learning tool for them to gain a lesson, but also maybe link it back to some of the theory we've discussed there?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I suppose, just say for example, if I was working with an athlete directly, okay, we'd be able to discuss and challenge. So my role in that situation would be to challenge them about, I suppose, how realistic it is, and all of that along the way, and check in, okay, and is there a different way? So we discuss that. You could also discuss it with a coach. But with a student in front of you, I think it's a little bit harder, because you could be looking at it knowing it's not that realistic, but they might be telling you it is realistic. So again, it's just about, could you challenge them in a simple way of like, okay, well, if this happens, you just using reflective questioning to ask them, if this happens, do you think that's giving you enough time? Yeah. Do they have any evidence of that working before? Or can they think of a time where they might have set too many goals, not given themselves enough time, and how that might have worked out for them? So just chatting to them about that. The only other way is learning through. So again, it could be that they set the goal and it's not working out midway. And then it's about adjusting the goal from that. What are they learning? Are they learning anything from it, and linking it back to the theory? I don't know if that's fully answered your question.
No, I think that's spot on, yeah. That's spot on. Lovely.
Okay, so the last topic we're going to look at is concentration. Now, I suppose I'll be honest, when it comes to concentration, this is what I call more of the higher level skills, okay? Because it's at the top of the pyramid, and usually our concentration is fine until we're under pressure. So concentration is the topic that feeds in and funnels to performing under pressure. And when we think about it, confidence influences our concentration and what we think about. Our motivation impacts our concentration. So a lot of things impact it. But a nice analogy for concentration is it being a spotlight. So, we can say, oh, I lost my concentration. We don't lose our concentration. We're always thinking about something or focused on something. Our attention is always on something. So we don't lose it, we misplace it. It's on something that it shouldn't be, or on something that's not relevant. And I heard this term before from, it was Vera Pauw, who was the former Irish manager for the women's team. And she just discussed with the team about being where their feet are. And I also loved that kind of analogy of being where your feet are, because when we're performing under pressure, a lot of the time we're either fast forwarding or we're rewinding. So our attention has gone back to the mistake we might have made, or I should have done that. Or you're fast forwarding, which was in my case when I used to play, of, gosh, don't pass me the ball, I'm just going to lose it. So our concentration is always somewhere, but we need to figure out how we can make that better. So again, in the PEAI books, I know that there is the Nidecker's 4 quadrants of attention. So these are attentional styles. So theoretically, what we're saying here is that our concentration is always on something, whether it be internal or external, or whether it be broad or narrow. Okay, so that's in the books. So to for me, sometimes that just seems hard to grasp, for students, all right? And even for athletes as well. But it can also be really helpful to link. So couple of task ideas could be basically getting them to map their sport and getting them to kind of think about their sport or two contrasting sports. So one being, for example, darts or archery, where you have to have a very narrow focus versus an open play sport, soccer, football, etc., where there's just invasion all the time, okay? When you're defending and attacking. Compare and contrast the different scenarios in the sport and map them along the quadrants and just get them to set themselves up under there. You can see that on the quadrant here, there's examples, okay? So when we're external, broad, we're assessing, we're taking something in from the environment. When we're broad and internal, we're analysing, we're thinking about something, okay? And when we're more narrow focused, we're about to do something. We've decided it's more about the action. So you can compare and contrast those ideas, and online you can get different examples and samples as well. But another one, after they figure out what the difference is between broad and narrow, internal and external, what I really like to do is ask them about distractors and facilitators. So I would talk to them about what are your biggest distractors in sport. In other words, what disrupts you from your concentration? And I get them to break it into maybe internal and external. So internal, it could be, thinking about the past or hoping to win in the future, fast forwarding too much. And that's a distraction as well. It could be worry, self-doubt, apprehension. It could be the fact that last time this happened. So they're stepping up to take a penalty and, in my last penalty, this happened. So we're not on the present. The external distractors or facilitators could be, again, it could be noise. It could be coaches. It could be your peers, the people around you as well. It could be the distraction, which happened to me as a kid, of someone would step off the bus and they had really good kit. So I was like, they're definitely really good if they have good kit, and that would be my distractor. So get them to map what either distracts them and then what helps, okay? And then understand the impact of those changes. So I would go back to my thoughts, feelings and behaviours. How do these things change my thoughts, feelings and behaviours in that? And what we've done with that is we're bringing the theory alive a little bit more through our own examples and our own experience, and we can map them back to the changes in our attention. Well, actually, when I go and think about the past, I'm gone narrow internal, which means I'm missing all of the cues in my environment. I'm missing the pass from a player, or I'm missing that I need to be scanning to create space, okay? Same with the external. I'm too busy looking at my manager. I think they're about to take me off. Well, I am broad and external then, okay? And I'm missing again everything that's going on in there, or I've gone internal to give out to myself. So how does it change our thoughts, feelings and behaviours? And it's just a nice way to map it onto the theory. And again, I just put the buttons there. Most of the time when it's internal or external, we're fast forwarding or rewinding. But we need to remember, we have the capability of bringing our spotlight back to being where our feet are. So, a couple of ideas for tasks for before, during and after. I've colour coded them. So, for the before, to help with concentration, okay? Setting our goals or competition plans can help set our focus and our attention on the relevant controllable things. So it narrows our focus to what we need to do and what we need to action before we go in. So we have a really good template before the race, before the match, okay? We also can work on our routines. As we know, routines can help us for the during. So I put it in before and during. Also, something to help train our attentional focus for performance is mindfulness. Okay, I'm not 100% sure if that's covered in your curriculum, but if it is, I have a link here to the Smiling Mind app. It's an Australian app, and I like this app because one, it's free, Students can download it. It doesn't just work on mindfulness, it is linked to health and well-being as well. But it has a sport, it has a study section for school, it has different sections. It has on the pitch, it has nighttime, it has study stress. So it has a lot of different sections to it. And if you click on the link, it also brings you through some teacher resources. So there's some teacher resources there as well, I believe. They're the things that we can work on before. The better our concentration is outside of sport, the better it'll be inside on the pitch when it matters. So we practice it first outside, okay? It won't automatically happen just during. But during, what we can do to bring, as I said, that lovely little spotlight that changes as the wind changes, to bring our spotlight back, if we recognizing it changes, we can use our self-talk. Our cues are our technical or instructional self-talk to take a deep breath and bring us back to the present and focus on what we need to do. So if we've created our goals or our competition plans correctly, we might have a couple of cues to be like, okay, my next job is I need to create space, I need to track back, I need to get my player or stay on their shoulder. So no matter how I'm feeling, I can bring my focus back to there. As I've mentioned before, the other one is thought stopping. So when we don't have time to do much else, we just want to learn and catch our thoughts when they happen automatically, then just stop them, take our deep breath and come back to focusing on the present. So thought stopping during a competition or a race or whatever it is very effective. And lastly, our breaths. I'm going to be giving you a sample of this in a minute, but just that simple breath, physiologically, it can slow down our heart rate, it can give us more oxygen, relax our muscles, which then helps our body to interpret that we're not under threat, that we're relaxed and we're capable of managing what we can. And then again, after is reflection. How did the competition go? What distracted me? What helped me? What would I do next time if I was in that situation? Okay? So just to give you a couple of examples before we finish up of where I'm going with that. Chloe Kitts, I saw this online as well. She was doing some colouring. You'll see this come into play a lot more. I've seen a lot more colouring books on the sides of pitches or in between plays or whatever it might be. And she had given the comment that she used to put in her earphones because she saw everyone else doing it. But music actually doesn't relax her. So she figured actually being distracted or being present with the colouring, it's more about ACT, which is acceptance commitment therapy, which is just being present and not trying to banish feelings. It's just being present and focused. I've seen other examples online of gymnasts doing like a chemistry test or biology test, that they're literally just focused in the present. So something that is not too taxing. You see a lot of athletes as well, they play cards a couple hours before or whatever it might be. So it's bringing us present. Great picture there of David. I saw when they were Donegal obviously versus Kerry, and they were in the pre-match march in Croke Park for the All-Ireland final. And we know that Donegal, when they were playing Meath, they broke the march really early. And Meath also then broke. They didn't know what to do. When that happened in the All-Ireland final, the camera panned to Dave Clifford and I saw his face and it was just focused straight ahead on the people in front of him and he was taking deep breaths. The eyes, the gaze didn't break. So he had his deep breaths to again just settle, relax, both physiologically and mentally, I can only imagine. And the last one is probably one of my favourites from the Euros this summer. I put the link here for Guy Jourdain. He is a brilliant researcher and applied practitioner in terms of particularly his focuses on penalties and routines. And I saw him, I think it was on LinkedIn, and he had noted about Chloe Kelly and the time it took her to place the ball on the penalty spot and to take a penalty, when it matters. And he was just talking about when we take our time and have our routine set, it helps us to keep a safe foundation, keep our attention locked on task and having that sense of control. He has done amazing research from penalties dating back to the 70s, and people can rush their penalty because they just want to get it over and done with. So they're not thinking on the routine, they're rushing it. He's also done the research and interviewed people who take a long time to take their penalty. And again, that goes to the overthinking. So he talked about routines and setting our routines no matter how we're feeling. That can help relax our body. It can help draw our focus to something specific. And it's a sense of security because this is something I've done all the time and know how to do. So again, if you click on this link, it will bring you to his website as well, and you can find some resources and you can find some information about routines and specifically his work on penalties. So everything we really discussed, particularly in concentration, it's about creating a performance bubble. Focusing on the controllables. Things don't always go to plan, so we can still have a roadmap for the what ifs. But we still then want to bring our attention back to the present. So it's, for me, creating that understanding about the spotlight. It's always on something. How can we ensure it's on the most effective things?
Yeah, but it's really good stuff around concentration. I just have one question there. It relates a bit to any student setting up their own personal action plan, but also like to the teachers who may notice a lot of unconcentrated or distracted students in front of them. How trainable is concentration in this distracted world we live in versus is it more important to just try and limit distractions, or can we try and target both?
Oh, that's a really good question. And again, I do think it's dependent on on the person. So yeah, again, I'll take it twofold for the athletes I work with versus maybe students as well. So with athletes I work with, no two athletes are the same. So for some, it's about distracting. For others, it's about, focusing on some of the specifics. So some people might need a little bit of a distraction, chatting to friends before a match, or doing those things, going out for a walk, having something pre-planned. For others, they like to be really methodical and kind of focus on different things. Again, with students, I really feel it's twofold, as you said, eliminating distractions for sure. So I would identify the key things that distract me. If I'm studying, for example, it's, maybe the phone. So the phone might be on silent, or have it outside of the room and you're banking it for 10-minute periods, 20-minute periods, half an hour periods. That focuses us on something very clear and specific, okay? But it has to be trainable. So concentration is trainable, but it won't happen on the pitch unless we train it outside. So a lot of the research will show us that the more we train it, and that's where mindfulness is coming in a lot more now, the more we're able to shift our attention and be present in the moment, the better it will be. But what I will say with this is, when I've worked with athletes before, they went, Emma, I tried this and it's not working. Just like self-talk, we are going to have thoughts. Like, we're not robots. So thoughts are going to pass in and out of our mind. That's not a judgment. So the main thing is, don't think it's not working just because you have a thought, or because you have a bad thought or a negative thought, or because you get distracted. It's more what we do catching it. So thought stopping is about catching it and replacing. So stop, replace. Okay, so recognize, reset, refocus. They're the 3 R's that can really help. And that's a tool in that workbook as well. The 3 R's: recognize, reset, refocus. And the more we can do that outside of the pitch, outside of the track, the better it will be inside.
Oh, really good, yeah. Fair play. Thanks for that.
Okay, so just to sum up, I guess, this whole webinar, for me, teaching sports psychology is more about connecting to the why it works, not just the what. We can most definitely teach the what, being the concepts of concentration, motivation, all of that. But it's really why these things matter, and creating those connections via metaphors, analogies, examples. And then when it comes to before, during and after, as I've said, a lot of overlap happens with the strategies and the tools that we use. So what can be used for motivation can be used in a different way for confidence or concentration. So we just have to create that understanding of why something is relevant, more so before. versus why it might be relevant during or after. On the last slide, I just have a couple of resources that you can click on. So as I've said, for the routines and penalties, gear is very good. The Performance Mind, Josephine Perry has some resources as well, some simple tasks that you might have seen throughout this webinar. Now, I have Rotella there, the case studies in sports psychology. This is 1998. There might be an updated one since, but I still have this book, and it can be useful in class to give, for example, a 1 or 2 page reading task, and it has questions at the back of it, and it might be related to motivation, it might be related to confidence, and it can just again help create a little bit more of an understanding of the topic as well. As I said, the Mental Skills for Athletes workbook gives a lot of tools and strategies that you could use in class. And the Sports Psych Show I have mentioned throughout as well. Sometimes it's Dan Abrams, and he has some nice guests on that can create an understanding for the different topics that we have in class.
Emma, that's been excellent. Thank you so much. All those resources you have mentioned will be linked below in the description box, and will be housed in a little folder or a page or something on the PEAI website in the member section. From everyone at PEAI, I want to thank you so much for this. We'll hopefully stay in contact, and as I mentioned earlier, this is kind of a follow-on from your really well received in-person workshop at the 2024 conference, and based on feedback and everything, it's something I may look to replicate over the next couple of years.
Yeah, no problem. I hope it makes sense for everyone, and thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you.